Hey folks, it's Friday, so we're gonna do some stuff, and today we're going to play with Spelljammer Dogfighting, and everything that goes along with that sort of thing. Give me a hot second here for me to hit my signals here to drop stuff. I have not taken the time to properly draft out what my call-out message is. We're doing today is Spelljammer Dog Fighting Mechanics. And then here, if you check out the link down below, I'm just getting things prepped up to fire up here for about an hour or so. Live streaming, design, and let's go to here, and then we're going to quote tweet here. There's a link down in the description below with my Twitter account, which I'm feeding a link into now. There's also the playtest content. Today is ship dog fighting. There we go. And then I post that there. So yeah, down in the description below, there's my Twitter, which I just posted to. There is the DMsGuild link, which has like all the color mana stuff I did for MTG. That's a good proof of concept for you to see, like how do I do business. I make everything available for people to read cover to cover, for you to know that what I'm introducing is something that you want in your campaign. Let's see, there's also, there's also a link in the description to the playtest content that we're actually going to be building inside of today. So it's a Patreon link. Click the Patreon link. It takes you to an about page, like just basically a musings page or whatever. You don't have to be a Patreon to use it, but it's just, hey, here's what I got going on. It'll take you to the playlist for this development series that I've been doing, as well as get you into the actual playtest document, which you can see is here, the in command, mass combat, and guild playtest content. So let's see, we are last night when we came through, we were picking out from Boo's Menagerie all the different critters that it feels like should be able to spell jam, or rather be able to travel from planet to world to world, as it were, within their own lifespan. Because the way that it's listed, the Lights of Xeraxis implies that a lot of these creatures can move at speeds that can parallel your ship unobstructed, millions of miles per day. But there's actually no mechanics about that in the SAS, the Spelljammer's Adventures in Space, or like I like to call it, Wizard SAS. So Wizard sassed us and didn't really provide any mechanics about it. So I'd gone through and picked out a selection of critters in here that are most likely going to be able to travel between the planets themselves. But that's part of like maintaining a lifestyle aboard a ship, the cost of magic repairs, spell casting for magic repairs. Let's see, we're doing squadrons and massive structures, which are going to be like objects that are like more than 500 feet, like miles, which we already have the mechanics for in this document, or further up in the page, but this is the last back of it. We have the different siege weapons recalibrated to using this scaling command system. How to command crews of siege engine teams. Spells that can affect the command checks that you issue as attack rolls against using siege machines against other vehicles. How gravity planes work. How piloting Spelljammer ships work once you're actually in the helm. More than just sitting there and wishing you could cast a spell. We give you stuff to do. So that's useful. Give me a second while I look at. Yeah, okay, that lines up pretty nicely. Let's see, maintaining concentration, paladin statistics, languages, feats, which is actually the piloting, and then we got characters that are in command of ships, how gravity planes work and scuttling enemy ships, the size of different spell jamming ships. Last night we were working on using scale and tactical maps. There's still pieces everywhere. I've got these little caret marks as stuff that still needs to be developed. But like here was a close look at a 50 million mile square for navigating around your screen with. You know what? I think I should probably get into roll 20, and then let's get into the vehicle playtest. And let's launch this because today we're talking about dogfights. So. Okay, so one of the common themes that we've been talking about in the playtest is this concept of scaling maps, right? So when we were, I'm just going to pull this out into its separate thing. So like here we have the Xeraxis space system from Light of Xeraxis. Each one of these squares is 100 million miles, which essentially means that you can travel one square per day at the 100 million mile scale. Here is a scaled out, each square is 200 million miles to show the realm space where Toril and Forgotten Realms is located at. Toril is all the way in here next to the sun at 200,000 miles. It's within 200 million miles, which is within one square of the central sun. But then you can see like Hakatha is the furthest. I've got two. This guy should actually be here. I'll have to go in and fix that. But Hakatha is in this furthest orbit, which is 1.6 billion miles or 16 days travel away from the sun, and still 1.4 million miles away from the outer edge of the sphere. So it takes 30 days to basically get from Toril to the outer limits of the shell to then breach into astral space and continue forward. So like if you're on Toril, you want to travel realms, you're gonna fly for a month before you even get to actually start your adventure outside of the sphere. And there's gonna be, you're probably going to pick a course that's not near Hakatha, because beholders are bad news, dude. Just bad news. Stay away. So we had that scaling. So this is 100 million miles. This is 200 million miles per square. Then we have a more useful map to scale into. Here's the inner planes of realm space, the sun, Anadia, and then Koliar, and then here's actually Toril, and these are 50 million mile squares, so you can move 1-2 squares per day, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. So it takes 3 days to get while in this position between Koliar and Toril. And we talked about how DMs can spend time, like how frequently, what timing do you need to spend on changing the position of the planets in your solar system map? And the answer is not very frequently. Like ideally you're only doing it once every 10 days or once every 30 days or once every season, which is like 100 days. So you have that scaling. And so on that note about scaling, we had spent some time yesterday and the previous day talking about visibility. How easy is it for you to spot different size objects that you could just run across drifting through the astral sea or inside of a crystal sphere in wild space? And the smaller the object gets, the more difficult it is for you to notice while you are navigating through space at high speeds, and how far away you could be encountering these things. So like if the DM can either take it from a perspective of these are just random things that we could run across each day. So I'm going to roll a d10 to see what random stuff is out, or maybe a d6 to see, or maybe a d4, or like a d6 minus 1, like 2d4 minus 1, something like that. Anyway, small scale stuff like Rock of Brawl, it can be shown up on an orrery. the Xeraxis Citadel can show up on an orrery. So there's not much surprise there. It's these, it's this 1, 2, 3, 4. These, it's like D4 to see the size of object you could encounter, and then inside of that D4, say it's, say we're working at the scale of, it's the size of a Spelljammer ship, roughly. So that means that each one of these squares is going to be 500 feet, and you can drop your Spelljammer ship inside here. This happens to be illustration of a Star Moth, which is about 200 feet, which is about 200 feet long, 20 feet wide. So here at this 50-foot scale, where each one of these squares is 50 feet, you can see a 200-foot vehicle that has free gyroscopic rotation, being able to reorient itself so it can fire all its weapons at, say, this specific target. That's why it takes up this 4x4 squares, because it's 200 feet beam length, but the keel is only 30 feet wide. But if you're rotating your ship so that you can get weapons oriented on another angle, then your ship in reality, if it was like, say, give me the bit. So like if we had it illustrated, so it's like this, it still has these fat wings, right, that stretch off of it, so it still has this rough width because of the wingspan. It still has this rough square shape to it. The maps that we have for these vehicles in the book doesn't really. Here, I'll show you. Howdy. Hey man, how you doing? Larger scale travel in the system looks so in depth and sounds like it's fun to use. Thank you. It's we've been working on this command system again, if you check in the description down below, there's the Patreon link. You don't have to be a patron. I'd love it, but you don't have to be. Click into that. It'll take you to this playtest document, literally, that we're looking at right now. So you can just read along with me if you want. But yeah, it's, you have to, the way that the book presents it is that whenever you run across something that's significant, it automatically slows your ship down. What we're trying to do is we're trying to read, like it has these, let's go back to it. It has these things, where was it? The spores. Let's see if I can find these. Chwingas are so cool. Let me see if I can find them here real quick and not bore you to death in the process while I go looking for it. There's the fear, the gash, geef. It was some sort of fungus, and I suspect I'm going to utterly fail in attempting to find it here, like on the fly. But what was it called? Yeah, jammer leech. Thank you. Jammer leeches. These things are designed. They're like little barnacle things, and they try to sneak aboard your ship. They're what? Tiny. So they aren't going to show up. Your ship is never going to slow down for them. So how are they supposed to get on? How are they supposed to sneak aboard your ship if you're drifting through, if you're drifting through space at 1,000,000 miles per hour? And what opportunity would they have? So we have to build out mechanics where things can actually hide from being viewed that don't slow your ship down if you encounter them, which means there needs to be like a range of engagement. Like there's a lot of creatures that can't move at those accelerated speeds, but what we're working out here is that if they can be within a certain distance, like for example, a void scabber is like what, 25 some odd feet long, right? Is roughly the scale of an Avernus war machine, for instance. It could detect your ship, your Spelljammer, which is typically going to fill a 500-foot square, like we were just showing here, because this is a 500-foot square, this larger space. And obviously both of these ships fit within that square. But when you pan out to the 500-foot scale over here, you can't, just like at a 5-foot square on your map in a dungeon, if you have a pixie that's taking shots at you and that pixie's only 2 feet tall, it could fit inside of this 5-foot square space. But this is literally the size of a pixie inside of a 5-foot square. So when the in-command document gets released, we also get to do tiny heroes, where they're smaller than tiny, and they can continue scaling down into smaller and smaller inner space dimension, so you can go into people's ear canals and then give them aneurysms and stuff to knock out your enemy. But that's a later thing that we'll put out once the flagship In Command project comes out. But this is just a tear out for Spelljammer. But the point is that this Star Moth in a 500-foot square is the exact same ratio as a pixie on a 5-foot map. So when you're looking at it, this is your pixie in a dungeon walking around, and it's the same as this Kobold Defiler, also on a 5-foot scale map. You can't tell the difference between the two because they're at the same scale of resolution, which is 5 feet. It doesn't get any more finite than this. Pixie attacks, cha, right? So we're going to scan back out, and we're going to come back over here. We're going to look at ship combat, because the ship has that freedom of rotation and that hover ability during your turn to be able to freely reorient weapons wherever you need them to be reoriented to. That's why we maintain, it's technically a cube space that it fills, but we're not messing with three-dimensional combat because that's just, it's a monster. It's a monster to do, and there's not, honestly, a lot of benefits that we get in the system from actually doing that. But let's take a look at the Star Moth. Okay, so here's your Star Moth. Obviously, I stole that illustration. I'll make my own from when we actually release the project because I am not a thief. But here's your floor plan. So if we're dealing with a 5-foot scale floor plan, I have this. Hold on. I actually have this over here. Here's your Star Moth at actual 200 feet, like with each one of these squares in the map here being 5 feet. This is how obnoxiously large your Star Moth is going to be using this map if you're attempting to do ship-to-ship combat. It makes no sense. So we can't do that. We need to have this map off to the side, and because of the size of these ships being so narrow, you can see this is old 2nd edition maps. It's easy enough for us to be able to stack these things up, right? Like this is 20 feet wide, this is 20 feet wide, this is 20 feet wide, and then it has the prow or the beam length of the support masts not being mentioned on here. But we could easily, this is 10 squares wide, this is 4 squares wide, this is 4 squares wide, this is 4 squares wide. If you're at a kitchen table, right? If you're at a kitchen table, you need 20 inches of space for you to be able to drop your Star Moth map on there. But here in this virtual space, I could use these 2 squares, so I could have this Star Moth just eat up these 2 left. I've got a pretty strong CPU, so I can have a 100 foot by or a 100 square by 100 square grid here in Roll20, or Foundry or whatever it is that you're using. But Roll20 is the official product of DMsGuild, so I always work in Roll20. And I've got about 6,000 hours logged in there so far because that's where I run all my campaigns anyway. But you could have, on one side, you have your enemy ship. On this side, you could have your ship. And then you could have it'd actually be like 1, 2, it'd be 1, 2, 3 for this middle space. So I'm doing a horrible job of moving things around, but whatever. I always do these things spontaneously, so I'm never good at presenting this stuff. So forgive me, please. But like if this was another 10 squares wide, then you could have the full floor plan of the Star Moth over on this this row over here, and then so this would have to be 70 square. This is 30, yeah, 70 squares wide. I could then have like a hammerhead, like I could have a squid ship here, which I could then drop in and have over on this rung over here, and then I'd have this 30 squares by 120 square, 30 square by 40 square space in between that I could then have at the 500 foot scale, and then I could have in this block I could have at the 50 foot scale. So I could have ships at this 50 foot scale. Each square inside here is 50 feet. So the Star Moth could be engaging all these other Star Moths in battle and stuff. Like if this is your team's Wasp ship here, I'll zoom in. Like if this character is representing a Wasp ship that's, well, here it was a galleon, which is 120 feet long, which rounds up to 150 foot keel, so it fills this 3x3 space. it's obviously the Star Moth is bigger than it. So like the you know, the Star Moth, if it had a ram, if it rammed this ship, then it would be doing a lot more damage to that ship as a melee attack that your pilot makes. But to be able to even get to this point, we have to be sitting inside this 500-foot scale, right? So you get in the 500-foot scale, and like depending on my weapons are like at this distance, 2 squares away, I can hit you with a catapult, a mangonel, without disadvantage. But to fire that far away with a ballista, it's 1,000 feet away. That's outside of ballista range. So I literally have to be adjacent to your enemy ship at the 500-foot scale to be able to attack with a ballista. And if I do, it's at disadvantage because it's already inside its long range. So what we need to be able to do is to zoom into the 50-foot scale so that at this range is 50, 100, 150, 200. That's 250 feet away. Even at this range, if I'm firing my ballista, it's still at disadvantage. To get to this range, I have to make a piloting check to close distance, like to grapple. So at this scale, I make a piloting check, and if my enemy wants me to get closer so it can use its weapons and spells and whatever, then it's a non-opposed check and the grapple automatically occurs. We then automatically get to zoom. I'm going to do it like this instead. So I could theoretically have a couple of these ships in here, but I'm just going to pull all these guys out. There. So I've got this ship. I'm going to flip these. Okay, so this ratio here is now, I'm going to grab this guy here, because I'm the worst. Copy, paste here, and then let's scale this guy up. What was I saying here? Man, I can't wait to use solar dragons in my army. Hell yeah, solar dragons, dog. Hey, Tyler, how you doing, man? Fairy and Bounty command battles. Absolutely, dude. Quantum space. There was a movie called Inner Space. It was like, I think it was like 1991, 89. It was basically like a submarine shrunk down to the size of like Rick and Morty, right? Becoming the size of a blood cell and then going into somebody. Well, this system allows you to do that. So you just have to use an upscaled reduce spell to shrink your unit, your ships, and your troops down to microscopic size, so you can then go into a skin pore or whatever, and then start exploring your enemy's space. But so you use a pilot check, opposed if necessary, to zoom in to this dogfighting scale. So this is a scale of engagement. If I'm here and this enemy is here, that's 150 feet away. Let's check our rules real quick on scaling weapon distances that we have in the document here, translated to this command scaling system. Here's a RAM for melee attacks for the pilot to use, and pilot exploits that we started building out, so that you can spend your spell slots while you're in the pilot chair to be able to pull off cool things. Let's see. Gravity planes. Where's the weapons? There's a lot. There's a lot of rules that you gotta build out to deal with this scale stuff. And it doesn't surprise me that Wizard. I mean, I'm up to already with all these mechanics. I start on page 102 of this document, and it's already 131. So I already have 29 pages of document for translating ship movements, ship combat, maneuvering, visibility, engagement distances. It would double the size of the SAS book, and they didn't have the budget for it. So I see why they didn't do it, but it's obvious why people want this stuff, because it makes it so easy. I mean, we even have rules for, like, if you're imagining a sphere that you don't actually know, but you've heard described to you, where exactly are you going to appear inside of that wild space sphere in relation to the object inside of it that you actually wanted to get to? Like, I want to get to this phantom planet inside the shadow sphere. I know about the shadow sphere and I know about the phantom planet, but I've never actually been there. So we have all the mechanics for, well, how close are you going to appear to the phantom planet when you find it? How long is it going to take for you to even find the crystal sphere in the astral sea? We have all that in here, and it takes up pages of space that Wizards didn't budget to allocate. So that gives us the opportunity to create this stuff. And I know that people have been punching out a lot of content on the DMs Guild for there's I think there's 3 books now that are just lists of the different Spelljammer helms that were in 2nd edition that have been updated for 5th edition. I mean, I don't blame people for doing that. It's information that needs to be processed, and it's pretty low-hanging fruit. So it's not surprising it came out right away. But like a really deep mechanical detail of like how all of this physics breaks down using the actual mechanics of 5e, not just revamping 2e, like to build it into 5e to use 5e mechanics. It takes a while, which is why I'm doing this all on stream, so you guys can take a look at it, and why the raw document I'm making available for people to play test with, so that they can see that it works. That way, when I actually finish up this document, hand it off to Ukulele to clean up the writing, hand it off to Adam Hancock to do the editing, and they can then pass it back to me. Then I can start doing the layouts here on screen with you guys. And once the layout is done and I can build all the maps and that's done, I can then come back through and I can start doing all the painting as well and put in all the illustrations with you guys. And then when it goes on the DMs Guild, again, it'll be cover to cover, full visibility. It's just gonna have sample written across it for every page. But you'll be able to read the whole thing for you to know that it works for your system, that you should come back and you can buy my stuff. So that's my marketing strategy. Give you everything and hope for something in return. If only more businesses would work that way, people would be a lot better off, and hopefully the companies that deserve to be supported, it's like an unstarter. It's like a kick finisher. Like, I already built the thing. Check it out, and if you like it, please buy it. So there you go. But so on point again, sorry, marketing over. At the 50-foot scale, so the range on these things is 120 feet or beyond, and then we round up, so 150 feet. So at this range, 1, 2, 3, that's 1 square, 2 square, 3 squares away at the 50-foot scale. I have to be this close to hit you with ballistas without disadvantage. If this guy's loaded up with ballistas and I'm loaded up with ballistas, we want to be right here, nose to nose, just emptying our clips on each other. But if I don't want to engage with that, I can still hit you with a mangonel or a trebuchet at this range, and it would either be at advantage or disadvantage. It would either be at normal or disadvantage depending on how you're playing it out. But to be able to get my ballistas on you, I have to close distance even more. And at this scale, I can actually grapple you, like if I have like a scorpion's grappling claws, or like a nautiloid's grappling tentacles, a lamprey's piercing ram that staples you onto the ship, so you can just go across the prow and get onto the enemy ship. The boarding crews, you have to grapple the board. Otherwise, when it's the enemy's turn and they don't want to do that, they'll just move away from your ship, and everyone that wanted to cross gets dumped into the void, and then nightmares ensue. So crossing this line to get into your enemy's space, I mean, if they're open to engaging with you and they're bumping up against the line as well, you guys can just maintain that dogfight where you're at. But if your enemy's trying to get away from you, then you do a piloting check to breach that space and to actually enter this space with you. And once you're in here, your pilots can actually start doing melee attacks to do that grappling, ramming, or to line up your ship for a boarding crew to then jump across to get aboard your ship from like here to say here, for instance. And then you can knock these weapons over, and then when you scale back out, it's like you took out this guy's guns, so he can't attack you anymore. So he's running away. That's how that works. But it's like an opposed pilot check to get from 500 feet to 50 feet. And if this is where you want to be to dogfight, then great. But if you want to close even greater distance, then it's another piloting check to get inside this guy's space. And to get out of that arrangement, this guy then makes a piloting check to get away, and then makes another piloting check to span back out. And at this range, at the 500-foot scale, if he can succeed another piloting check, he can then span out to the 1 mile. I didn't want to do that. He can scale out to the 1 mile range, so each one of these squares becomes a mile. And at this point, you're out of weapon ranges. All you can do is track and pursue. And then that becomes another piloting check. You're just doing these scaling to this 10,000 mile range. So if we go back to our visibility scale, we can see at what range can you still have visual contact on an enemy ship for you to continue pursuing, or are you going to have to rely on an orrery for indirect tracking systems? Let's see, at the 500-foot scale, which is a Spelljammer ship, you can still see the ship at the 1 mile range, which is where we were at in here. So, and you can still make out good enough details to tell they've been hit. You just can't hit them with weapons because they're too far away. But you have eyes on them, so you can maintain pursuit. And then, if they're able to break further free to the 10 mile scale, then that is the upper limit of where you can. So, if this is now 10 miles, each one of these squares would be. Let's see. This is the 500-foot scale. Max range is a mile. 10 of these squares is a mile. So they breach out of that. We're now into the 1 mile scale. So this full larger 10 by 10 grid is 10 miles. If they get themselves up to the edge of this and try to get away, they again make a piloting check. And if they succeed in the piloting check, they then span out to the 100 mile range. And that is now at the very edge, 100 miles at this 10 mile square. That is the edge of where you can track something, unless you have an orrery. And if you have an orrery, you can track them all the way out to 100,000 miles. So at some point you lose visual contact of these things, and then you have to go to your orrery system and do like basically radar tracking. And you'll have like a little blip that you're being followed by this blip. And if you continue succeeding in piloting checks, you can continue expanding the scale of these things from 10 miles to 100 miles to 1,000, etc., etc., etc. It keeps spanning up. And once you break past this 100k mile range, then you are permanently. They can't. They'll have to do a tracking check to try to find you again, and they can only do that once per hour. So you automatically have. If you can escape, you get that short rest. Narratively, anytime it's an opposed check to either increase or close distance, it's whoever succeeds the check is the one that sets the distance. So if you're at the 1 mile range and they're trying to span up to 10 miles so they can get out of your view, it's an opposed check. If the pursuer succeeds, they don't just keep their distance, they actually close distance. So it goes from that 1 mile scale back to this 500 foot square scale. If the fleeing target succeeds in their check, it spans from that 1 mile square to the 10 mile square, and then they get out of view of you. Now you have to resort to orrery equipment or doing tracking and navigation tracking checks to try to find their scent again. So at the 500 foot scale, it's an opposed check. If you don't want them entering space with you, then you can try to flee the battle, or you can accept that you're going to have to close distance to 50 feet. So you have that scale, and you're always breaching into or further away from each other in scale, so that it doesn't get too complicated. So that's really. Hey Rob, nice to see you, man. Instead of keeping track of relation movement, right? So you can actually do this while you're moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour. If you can track each other, then you can maintain relative distances while still moving at high speeds. All you gotta do is just keep in mind what scale are you working in. So when you build your map, you've got your 5 foot scale, you've got your 50 foot scale, probably 2 columns of it. You've got your 500 foot scale, and then you probably, like this, like the Light of Xeraxis, it has a 1 mile citadel. So it fills this 1 mile space with each one of these squares being 500 feet. 500 feet is the scale that we use for individual ships here. So we're seeing all the star maws that are protecting the Xeraxis citadel. And like I have some of them that are ported here. This is their military shipyard. So I just dropped 2 units over here as like in standby to scramble if there's enemies. So you have the scout ships that are keeping an eye out and doing rotation around the fortress. And then I have these walking ballistas from MTG. I just stole some of their artwork, but they're catapult stations that they have set up. So if your team decides that if you're like when we play tested this, the first encounter is your galleon versus an elven starmoth, and they won the fight. So they were able to board, take over, and now have a stolen starmoth as the ship that they're running around in, instead of the stupid galleon and the living ship that they offer you later on. No, now the team can run around in their own starmoth. So if they can get to the Zaraxis space, they can fake the signals. It's an older code, but it still checks out, and then they can get into the actual flight pattern of the Zaraxis fortress. And if they wanted to, they could just open up the back end of their cargo ship here and just start dumping carpet bombs on them. So if they're flying around here, these siege machines, they'll recognize that this is an enemy ship. So while you're trying to do a strafe run, and each one of these squares has about 3,000 hit points, so it takes a lot to carpet bomb it. But you could drop it on this residential district, or if you wanted to stay centered on the military complex over here and over here, you could try to avoid civilian targets if you wanted to. But they have these different fortifications set up to try to zone out enemy ships from coming in and doing this kind of crap. And with this scaling mechanic and just the super basic rules of how the different siege weapons work, it's pretty easy for you to be able to sync up and make these strafe run attacks, bombing runs, doing these scaling sky skirmishes like this. Again, the document that we're looking at here is in the description down below. Just click into it to the Patreon that says, here's what I'm building for you guys to look at, and it'll lead you into this playtest document. And right now we're sitting on page 111 out of 131. The first 100 pages of this document is organizing individual NPC. I've got a pitchfork, I'm willing to help. It's great, get in the army, let's go. How to stack up armies so you can have minion troops attacking 1,000 troops at a 500-foot scale versus a ship, that sort of stuff. And then it has how to scale up in larger sizes, like we're doing here, using actual foot soldiers. And then it has stuff about building kingdoms, building mercenary guilds, how to organize resources to pay for things without having to track gold pieces and stuff like that. And then it goes to spell casting, how to build guilds, all that 100 pages of stuff that isn't even going to be in this book. That's all just once Spelljammer came out, we saw that all these mechanics naturally curve into vehicles. So we've been running Avernus Infernal War Machines at the 50-foot scale for a couple weeks, and then Spelljammer dropped, so we just converted everything up. And they're well, we won't have the actual full book released until next year, but Spelljammer's hot now, so let's just pull out the Spelljammer content and just build it out so it becomes a good base model that you guys, it's cool. It's a neat concept and it works. We've been playtesting it, it works. The only problem is that once you start scaling out to the point where you're controlling multiple ships, it just feels like you're a second level fighter or a third level rogue. You don't have a lot of special features. It's super fast and light and easy. So I agree with Wizards of the Coast that the 50-foot scale is really where it's at. Because over here at 50 feet, this is what? 50, 100, 150, 200, 250. I could just close a little difference and I could launch a fireball at this guy. Or I can hit him with a lightning bolt. Or I could fire arrows at him. So I could have my crew positioned at the 5-foot scale on these different... where'd it go? Thank you. Right. So if I stole that Stormoth, right? I can scale in here, and I know it's got some guns. It's got a mangonel, and it's got 2 ballista, right? And I can orient them in any direction because of the gyroscopic navigation system, the hover any direction immediately, and the ability to kick to 1,000,000 miles per hour in a flash if I can get enough distance away from my enemy to be able to ramp up my speed to take off. It's oh, he's trying to jump to hyperspace. We need to keep on his tail. So that's why you're trying to do these piloting checks to keep an eye on where your target is going. So once they outdistance your weapons, you can try to keep dogging them so you can keep an eye on where they're at so you can eventually catch up. over time, making a check every hour on a short rest. And so you have the ability to eventually catch up with him in that manner without having to bog the system down by slowing you to a 30-foot crawl while you deal with this guy, because it's impossible to be sneaky. It's impossible to do cool narrative tricks. Like, you can't have Boba Fett get dumped off the back of a 5-mile ship like he's just trash, so that when the Falcon flies by and bounces into hyperspace, Boba Fett can just kick on his Ori, get his tracking system going, make his wisdom insight check, use his Ranger class feature to mark you as the target. Now I've got advantage on my checks. I'm just going to keep an eye on my Ori, and I'm going to use a stealth check so that you don't pick up on me tracking you, so I can just stay in your wake until I find a time that I can close enough distance. It's like, holy crap, how did that guy get like way up on our ass? Bomb, 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 bomb. It's like, all of a sudden we're in combat. It's like, is there anything around here we can use for cover? It looks like in about 1,000,000 miles we're coming up on a stray asteroid belt. Do you want to try to duck into there? So yeah, let's try ducking into there. Oh crap, we just got eaten by a giant space worm. This isn't a cavern. And then that becomes your little micro adventure, right? It's just Empire Strikes Back. If you haven't seen it, go watch that movie, because it's awesome thematics. It's fantastic narrative. And using the system, it's just scaling. It's just scaling common sense and determining, just using stealth like you know how stealth works in 5e. It's just applying to the ships and the technology magic that we have to be able to use these systems. Like a spyglass, like a normal nautical spyglass, lets you see 10 times farther than you normally could. So that means that we have the rules for spyglasses. So if you want to make out the details of a floating human, I don't know if that human, like I was talking about before, hey, that could be an armored guy that's just dead, or it could be a warforged that's dormant until it gets into an atmosphere, and when it does, it reanimates and determines whether you're an ally or an unknown hostile. And it turns out this quadrant of wild space has literally thousands of these autonomes just floating there as a trap for any ship that comes into zone here. All of a sudden, they've got all these little autonomes that are crawling around your ship trying to tear it apart. It's like, God, what happened? You fell into a minefield, and you shot through it, and it had stealth on it, so you didn't even see it on your radar when it blipped by. They hit your gravity field, so they just naturally picked up into it, and they are just naturally just buoyancying their way to your ship. And when they get there, knives out, and they just start peeling off pieces. And now it's a matter of who's on alert, what's their passive perception check, and how soon are they going to notice that they've torn off half of your wing by the time you crap, we got to deal with that. So that's how this like scavers and like solar dragons or anything that hunts will either have its own its own high-speed cross-planar thing, so it can get from one planet to another looking for food. But almost anything that can fly in space has the ability to get close enough to an orbit that when it hits your atmosphere, it can just grab on and go with you. So it just gets caught up in your wake and just comes along with you until it can close distance enough to eat that guard on the stern deck that's sleeping. Snatch! Where'd he go? Well, that scaver just like hits the air brakes and falls off, and like before you even know that guy got bitten, he's like 10 million miles away. It's like, where'd John go? Now you got to circle back around and start looking for him. It's like, well, there's some scavers out there. Well, crap. Let's go see if we can see some John bits floating around out there and verify if he's still alive or not. That's the kind of stuff that we imagine we should be able to do with Spelljammer, but they didn't provide us any actual mechanics to do it. So that's why we're doing this process. That's why we're here. Hey, while you're here, all you guys, like, subscribe. I've just cleared 500 hours of watched content, and I have 90 viewers. And YouTube will start paying me if I can get up to 1,000 subscribers and get up to 4,000 hours of content viewed. At this current rate, it's going to take me about 5 years to get there, but this book will be published in about 2 months. So maybe a month if we're lucky. If I can kick it out in the next 2 weeks to Ukulele and Adam, for them to process, chew, and kick back to me. I could potentially have this thing out and published by the end of September. But depending on how much art time I'm going to need to paint, it could be early October. So helping me with algorithms and stuff to pull more eyes in, like, subscribe, share. Check out my DMsGuild books so you can see that I'm not a liar, that I give you everything that I do. If I publish it cover to cover, it's like Reddit is like, the only thing Reddit ever complains about is having to pay for stuff. So get on board. I show you all my work. Like, I show the work to prove that it's worth your time. And hopefully you guys are kind of grokking what we're doing here. So, what is it? It's 1:30. I've got about 20 minutes left. So I'm going to go ahead and put a timer here to give myself 20 minutes. Titans go. All right, so we're talking about dogfighting. How does that work? So at this 50-foot scale, we can see that there's like actual ship interaction. Ramming, all your weapons are going to work as intended at this range. You can fire spells at each other, but because you're looking at your board here at the 50-foot scale, doesn't eliminate the truth that you're actually still engaged at the 500-foot scale. So if we're at this 500-foot scale, you got your ship, and like maybe we've got an ally ship here, and here's a third ally. So like if you guys are all on your each on your own ship, like a normal D&D team, you could be running around and taking shots at each other, whatever. But as wizards, I will compliment wizards in realizing and advising that having each character on their own ship is basically going to limit them to making pilot actions to maneuver around, and then being able to issue orders to their crew to fire siege weapons. And if they have the action economy left over, they'll be able to like maybe pop off a spell or shoot their own thing or do something. But each of these characters have 500, like there's 1,500 feet, there's 1,000 feet. These characters really can't interact with each other with the rules as written. So it really is a good idea that everyone is on the same ship. And if you want to command multiple ships in a fleet, you can still do that. Back. It's like this Star Moth here, I can have all the characters on here. You can see, yeah, all my characters are on here. Meanwhile, out here, so this is like, say, let's say we call this Pixie the mothership. And we have a squad of like, say, 30 ships, and we're gonna break them up into squadrons of 10 each. So we're gonna go here, here, and here. Here's 3 different squadrons of 10 ships each. This is a 1 mile scale, so we can put 10 of these ships in each square, right? So they'll all come, like you can see here, like this is a 500-foot square here. Each one of these squares is 50 feet. Sorry, this is a 500-foot square. Yeah, 50 squares per 50 feet per square. So I can realistically, I could fit 4 moths into this 500-foot square, but they are tip to tip. Like that is dangerously close. Realistically, you should only have 1 ship per 500-foot square. So they have that maneuverability range, and it kind of just resolves their gravity plane, and it resolves their air envelope. Like this square, this 500-foot square is this Star Moth ship. So if you're inside of this space, if this is just like, if this is just me, let me grab that guy. Like if this is just me free floating in this space, this is a 50-foot squares. There's my guys sitting inside that 50-foot scale. I know that I'm inside of air. I know I'm inside of your gravity field. And if I drift outside of it, I'm not anymore. Like that's the easiest way to resolve if I'm gonna have my ship breach this space, I now have to worry about whose gravity plane is gonna get disrupted, who's gonna scuttle whose gravity plane. This Star Moth is larger than this. It's going to be an opposed piloting check. So here's the thought process behind that. Like if I'm coming at you from, because we're not dealing with 3 dimensions. So if I'm coming at you from like this top side and you're like this, and I come at you and I can win my piloting check, I can reorient your plane, so this one is now off kilter and it's getting scuttled and everyone's falling on their deck. So that's an opposed piloting check to be able to see well, I can see the ship is coming at them. I'm just going to line my nose up with them so that when they get here, it's just we're on equal terms, so no one's going to get scuttled, right? If I think I'm going to win that fight, bring it on, Scruffy. You're stepping into the lions, then I'm going to screw you up. So that's how you can easily deal with, since they can freely reorient like a gyroscope. If I see a ship coming at me from above, I can just tilt my nose so that when you come at me, we're lined up so no one gets scuttled. I can then use an action to grapple using my piloting check to jilt and then come down at him to try to toss his gravity plane. So pilots, they can be doing maneuvering and like all this movement stuff at the 500-foot scale against different enemy ships that are, you know, taking shots at each other and stuff. But your bigger problem is here in this dogfight, because you're trying to jockey against each other's positioning to try to throw off somebody's gravity field so they get scuttled and they get tumbled. And if they lose their gravity plane, then the pilot's going to lose concentration, and that ship gets disrupted for that round. They can't move anymore until they can get back into the seat and re-engage their ship. Go. And get back into gear and then start jamming some more. So that grappling check, that opposed piloting check is really valuable in combat, because you can be scuttling each other, throwing people all around on their decks, hanging off of railings, taking damage if they're not saving to keep themselves secure, or lashing themselves to the deck or whatever it is that they need to do while they're trying to fire weapons at each other. So at the 50-foot engagement is a lot of fun. And again, as we spoke about earlier, if you can close that distance so that you can actually get way up and actually board them, then we can scale back into the 5-foot scale, and we can have our characters like we got this 5-foot rail over here, right? So then we can take our characters and we can come over here, and we can start storming your ship, running around, putting axes through people, pushing them off the side of the railing, whatever it is that you need to do to get yourself to the point where you can get to the helm, shut down the ship, take control. Now I've got another ship in my armada. Steal it, get out of there. Now the entire Space Elf fleet is going to come after me because I stole their ship. But I'm stealing that ship so I can go back and I can carpet bomb their light citadel, because they're trying to kill everyone. So let's kill them before they can us. That's our goal, right? To destroy this thing, or to get them into a place where they won't be mean anymore. Messaging, what's up? Automobile Buzz Droids. Yes, exactly. Yeah, like from the second Star Wars movie, exact. Again, idea of how you got there. Very cool. I'm glad you guys are liking it. So we're pretty proud of the effort. We started work on this about a year ago when we first had the idea of doing mass combat using the normal 5e combat rules. It just took a while for us to. We had a full start. We had a good idea, but we had to rebuild the whole structure and then redo it because the first draft didn't work. So we had to rebuild the whole thing, and this one works. But yeah, the 50-foot to 5-foot scale is the most fun. So if you're commanding a whole fleet, the best idea is to have a command ship where your whole team is able to work together and deal with threats that actually come at your team to command. So each character can have their own squadron of 10 ships each, and you can be using you can have sending bands. You take a stack of wristwatches, you put them all in a bag together, and then you do an attunement, and all watches that are in the same bag together become attuned together. So if you're attuned to one of those watches, you can have a conversation with anyone else that has a watch. You can all communicate with each other freely. So you can have your strategists and your commanders on one ship, and while they're within the same wild sphere, you can have open dialogue and communication with them. So you can coordinate these different squadrons to help you against the enemy squadrons that are coming at you to defend themselves. So you can use a verbal action, just like if you were to conjure animals and summon 15 wolves. You couldn't conjure fleet, I guess. That doesn't exist yet. Maybe someday we'll do that. But if you accumulate, if through role play and trial by combat and all the different cool things that they have you do in Knights of Xeraxis, you can accumulate this fleet of ragtag enemies that have a grudge against the Star Elves. You can gather them all up into this ragtag army and have their fleet attack the elf fleet. And you've all got watches, so you can coordinate your squad with your watch, and your allies can coordinate their squad so that you can use a verbal command, just like with Conjure Animal, attack that squad. And then this whole squadron of ships, instead of like dealing damage, like a single ballista, right, does D10 times does D4 times 10 damage. A mangonel does D6 times 10 damage. A trebuchet does D8 times 10 damage. A gift cannon does 2d8 times 10 damage, unless you're like unless you have like a really well skilled crew, it could do more. But like that gift cannon hurts. 2d8 times 10 damage. But if you had a whole squadron of gift cannons, 10 ships in a squad, it's not going to do 2d8 times 10 damage. 10 of them is going to do 2d8 times 100 damage. That's as easy as squadrons needs to be. Otherwise, it's a normal attack roll. You're doing your normal movement. We're moving at the scale of 500 feet per square, the 500-foot scale. So at this map, you've got these squads here. Like if this is a ship and this is a ship, this is a 500-foot square. A highly like a ceramic or light wood ship has a low armor class, has a low damage threshold, but has high maneuverability. So it can move 3 squares in a round. But something tanky like a scorpion that's made out of metal, high armor class, high damage threshold, crap movement. It can only move 1 square. But you can use a object interaction to move your ship once. You can use a bonus action to dash. And you can use your standard action to move again. Now, if you're using a fast ship, that's object interaction, bonus action, standard action, and that's your action economy for the round. You're done. But if instead you go, say, object interaction to close distance, I'm now going to use an I'm now going to use my bonus action to enter a dogfight at the 50-foot scale. And once I'm in this range, you're stuck there until you choose to leave. And if you want to leave, you have to use an action yourself to get out of that space. So, and if you do, then it pushes back out to the 500-foot scale. So this guy could use one action to saunter up, another action to get into dogfights, and then use a third action to try to then close distance. I'm out of action economy. So now I'm a sitting duck, but I can't actually do anything, though my team could potentially jump across to the other side. I could instead wait here at the dogfight range, and when the round turns over, maybe this guy wants to close distance as well, so that he can board you. Or maybe he wants to bug out, so it's his turn, he gets his 3 actions. Maybe he wants to close distance and you want that, so it's a free, it's no contest, but still takes an action to do it. And then he can use, like that's his object interaction, he can now use a bonus action and a standard action to attack you twice. Scuttle, scuttle, like for instance, that'd be an opposed check. He'll try to scuttle you. Like say his first action, like his standard action then is to try to scuttle you. And if it fails, that's a wasted action, no impact. If he would then have his last action, he could choose to say dodge, so that his ship and everyone on it you're going to be at disadvantage to attack that ship and everyone on it, as well as trying to scuttle it or ram it. So dodge is supreme in this game, but it eats up your action economy of movement. Because using that same action economy, you have to move, you have to close distance, ram, scuttle, and do piloting checks to engage. Here's the other piece of it. While I'm dogfighting and you're moving around the field, you've got this relative 50-foot distance to each other. But on top of that, you're still existing out here at the 500-foot scale. So if you have successfully engaged an enemy at this 50-foot range, these two ships are locked together like this while that's maintained. Whoever succeeds a check, they're piloting, again, something else to do with your action economy is whoever succeeds a piloting check can actually drag the enemy ship as though you grappled them. But you're not actually, well, if you had grapples and like you literally grappled their ship, then you could literally be grappling and dragging them. But from a piloting check, this is a classic dogfight where you're trying to wing around and trying to get guns on them and trying to stay in their blind spot so that you have advantage over them. That is represented by if I can lure or chase. So if it's my turn and I want to lure my enemy, I can do a piloting check, and if I beat your check, I can, like, say it's a star moth, so it can go 1, 2, 3. I can drag your ship with me by baiting you into chasing me during this conflict, or by angling my fire to force you over into alignment with where this fleet is at, and now you're within this ship's Mingalin range. And since you're locked in combat over here in this dogfight, my ally is going to have advantage on everything to hit that ship while they're grappled with my ship. Does that make sense? It's using the exact same grappling rules at the 500-foot scale, but it's being narrated by how these ships are engaging each other in this dance. This I like the term endless waltz because I'm a Gundam fan, and believe you me, I will have giant Gundams in, not this product, but we will be doing Gundams. Giant 500-foot mecha ships running around with, D8 times 100 damage swords to cleave through your starship. Stuff like that. That'll be the next project after this. If this sells well, we'll be doing Gundams next. And then after that, we'll be doing Modrons. So, I mean, there's a ton of crap we're going to be putting out for this system. Yeah, extrapolating the same mechanics up eases the learning curve. Right, all those mechanics just work. It's just how are you narrating it? It's just changing the flavor. So the only real mechanical changes that you need here is the scale, which is 500 feet. And instead of it being a strength dex check, it would be an intelligence or dex check. Piloting is generally either intelligence or dexterity plus, your piloting skill, or like your flying vehicles tool proficiency if you have that. So that's the basic mechanics of that, and that's how that works. So we're going to be spending time probably later on today continuing to flesh out that documentation, all those rules on this, like what I just went over in this past hour. My job is to convert that stuff into text and to place it in this section here under using scaling maps and ship combat. So that is just about my time. So you keep an eye on this document. We're going to keep updating it. It's read only right now. So once we finish up, like, this is just the rough draft. So once the rough draft of this is done, what we'll do is I will cut this piece out. It'll drop off of you and then get handed out, because I can't give you stuff online and then put it on the DMsGuild. It's going to do everyone a lot better being 100% preview on the DMsGuild, where they can find it and like search for it and actually find it and buy it if they want it, but read it. It'll be much more useful to people there than if I were to like just put it on my Patreon as a freebie thing, because who gives a crap about me? DMsGuild is awesome, and I want to give them money, so it's like they deserve it. Wizard of the Coast put out effort to put the stain into it. It just happens that we have spent a ton of time actually thinking about this stuff without a limit on time and without a budget limit, other than me and a couple of us making sure this thing works. So I can't let you guys just have this, but you can read it, but it's not the final draft. So once we get through this first draft, we get these rough ideas here in text for you guys to chew on. We'll be stripping this entire thing out, handing it off to Adam Hancock to edit, and then once he's done with that, then we'll come back here. We'll drop it into our page layout program, build the thing out here on stream with you guys to see me basically laying out text, and then I'll do all the painting on the pages. I'll export the whole document as a PDF, and then come back over here into Photoshop, where I build assets. So we'll build the assets. You can check in my playlist down below. I have only a couple pieces that I actually was doing work on in illustration. I used to do it on Twitch, and then I realized that Twitch throws all your stuff away. So I think I still have those files backed up someplace, but I just figure it's a new product, it's a new day. Why don't we just do things like front to end, just like my books online you can read. I want you to watch the entire process. And this is just the development phase. You don't get to watch the editing. But once that's done and they pass it back to me, then I'll come back online. We'll drop it into the document to do the layout. So we'll build it out. And then this will disappear. And it'll be available for you guys to look at online elsewhere. So that's pretty much my wrap. Let's see if there's anything else that's laying around here. Looks like I'm up to date. I got to get back to the real world. My timer's about to pop, so I'm going to go ahead and cut stream here. Other things that I'm working on: Martial Powers Monday. I have a mana system that I'm building for martial characters like barbarians, fighters, rogues, as well as alternates for monks. There's about 170 powers in the playtest document, which is also available on my Patreon, so go check that out. It's the same setup. It's going to be on DMsGuild eventually. The DMsGuild link that I have down below here has like tap and tap burn, 5-color mana spell point variant rule mechanics for MTG settings using 5-color mana instead of spell slots, and that covers like a good 10 classes in the game, plus the variant, the fighter and rogue variants for the knights and tricksters. But we want to have a full mana system for every class in the game. So the Martial Powers project creates non-spells that use mana, kind of like if you were to take the fighter battle master, and instead of spending a superiority die every time you wanted to do a maneuver, you'd spend a point of mana to do a maneuver at first level. Scaling up to 5th level, I can do a 5th level maneuver and like banish you to hell, by spending 5 mana and then hitting you with a sword. So then I would spend my 5 mana and then boop, you go to hell. And there you go. It's a non-spell. There's a bunch of rules and mechanics in there. I'm up to my 25th session of doing that, and it's maybe 75% way through the initial draft. And just like this, once I get through all that content, I'll then hand it off to Ken Carcass. He's out of Australia. He does a lot of really cool OGL as well as DMsGuild stuff. He's my editor. He was involved in the 5-color mana spell point variant rule project that I put out as well as an editor. So I already have good relations with him, but he's on board for the Martial Powers. On Mondays, I go over that document and I update it. Right now, we're converting all the monk subclasses into the Martial Powers system so that the abilities of the monk curve with this mana system that we're building. And then otherwise, the other project that I've been streaming is Eberron. There's an Eberron adventure for 8th level characters that I built with Andy the Old Goat, who does a lot of Call of Cthulhu stuff, and Stuart Braz, who has a lot of credits on the DMsGuild and a real deep lore sink into Eberron in general. He's our editor, so we're really lucky to have him as well. And that is currently being pushed out to DMs to play test the adventure with their own teams without me or Andy being involved in hand-holding through the process. We already did a number of playtests as DMs, running teams through the adventure, and that went great. But that's us understanding it. We invented it, so we know it. So then we handed it off to DMs to have them start running the adventure, and that's what's happening right now. So that means that I get to work on the book cover for Eberron, as well as just clean up some little naggly bits. But almost all the maps are done. If you check down my playlists, you'll see the Eberron stuff that I've been doing. That's like I think that's up to session 30 something also. Like I've done a ton of mapping in the same format, so you can see how I do illustrations and stuff, which I'll be doing for this project as well. So those are the 3 projects I have going on right now. So on Monday night, if everything's up to speed and I'm handing it off to DMs, if there's any nagging bits left over on Monday, I'll have those finished. But if those are resolved, then I'll be on stream Monday night doing artwork for the Eberron adventure. Monday lunchtime is the Martial Powers development stream. Thursdays are generally Spelljammer or In Command, as are Fridays. Saturdays are usually playtesting of the In Command mechanics that we've been using. We're doing both Spelljammer stuff as well as Descent into Avernus stuff, and now we're blending the two of them, taking these ships from Spelljammer through Hellspace to go, because Zariel's Flying Fortress is a Spelljammer ship, and it should be. Now that the rules are out, it's obviously a Spelljammer ship with a giant bladed ram underneath it that carves up ships, or that carves up enemies and vehicles and stuff along the ground. So those are the projects that I'm working on. So like, subscribe. I post often on Discord and on Twitter. So catch up with me on those channels so you know what I got going on when, if you're interested. And be welcome to give me a shout, like, subscribe, blah de blah, and it's time for me to log out. So I'm going to bounce, and I really appreciate everyone taking an interest and taking a look at this, and especially the feedback from people that it makes sense. That's the most important part, that this shit just makes sense, because we want tools for people to use so that they can take something super cool like Spelljammer and then Planescape next year to be able to make these things blend together so that you can do things like, I want to run the Blood War for a couple thousand years. It's like, great, here's how you can run the Blood War. Here's how you can do the Modron March. Here's how you can have 5,000 foot tall giants in Isgard attacking gods. It's like, these are all things that we can do using these mechanics, and the In Command of Spelljammer combat and exploration is just the first piece of it. So, boy. I really appreciate you guys showing up, taking a look, and it's time for me to go. So, see you later.